provides info.
There we go. All righty. I'd like to welcome everybody. Got a couple of notes. We have a new member, Tim Johnson, is the new alternate.
We debate whatever we want.
Welcome. Thanks for being here. Today's elections should include the chair and vice chair. So that's regular business. I need.
I would make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Approval of the June 13, 2017 minutes.
Make a motion to approve the June 13th minutes.
Second.
We are prepared.
Okay, Ann, Claire and Ann seconded for the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Director.
For those of you who aren't aware, Austin Parker's father, Lee Parker, passed away on Sunday night. Lee was very instrumental in working with a lot of the smaller communities in the WAMPO region. He's also a city attorney and municipal court judge in a couple of cities. And he'll be sorely missed. He worked also at Wichita State University in the Hugo Walls School for Public Affairs. His service is Thursday at the Presbyterian Church at 1958 North Webb Road in Wichita. Also, we distributed a transportation fact sheet to you today. It has a lot of interesting facts and figures about transportation-related materials and facts in the WAMPO region and how we do touch a lot of the country and the region as well.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 3 is the vice chair for the TB. With that, you have any? Okay, so I would open the nominations for the chair.
Make a motion, Dan, be chair. What was that?
I want to move that the chair remain Pete's ballpark.
Good afternoon,
We have a
everybody.
motion on the floor for 2 people, myself and you, to be chair. And then we haven't had a second or an end or any additions or whatnot.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. This is the elections, item number 3. Okay, thank you, Claire. I have a motion and a second. Are there?
Wait just a minute.
Well, we had 2 nominations.
Right,
We
2
didn't have a
nominations.
motion. All right, my
I'm sorry.
apologies.
Careful there.
Tell me what we have.
Well, I'm not sure what we have, but I think before we vote, we should have a confirmation. How is our election process going to work? Are we going to have, sounds like open
Any other
nominations
nominations
from the floor?
Yes.
And how do we do that? It's the process. We ask 3 times and see how many people are nominated, right?
Okay.
Is that right? Is that it? And then
basically
we cease nominations and then we, and vote? Okay.
Okay,
It
so
sounds
there's
like
been
we've
a
had 2
motion for the chair.
nominations. Tom nominated Dan, and Dan nominated you. Now you're all caught up.
Okay. So do we have any other suggestions for chair? Yes, sir.
I move nomination cease.
There's been a motion to move, and it's been seconded. Thank you, Kelly. So there's been the motion on the floor is to cease nominations. So any other questions? So all in favor of ceasing the nominations, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. So now we go to the election of the chair. There's two candidates, correct? Myself and Mr. Wojak. Would you like to give any speeches, Mr. Wojak?
Vote Pete. How's that? No, I would, we've kind of in the past been running on 2-year cycles, so. Oh, sorry, we've in the past kind of gone on 2-year cycles, so, and I think you've done it for a year, so I would think that would be a good precedence to stay with. That's all I got.
And if it is the desire of the policy body for me to serve another year, I'm willing to do so. I am willing to do so. I'd like to say I'm glad to do so. Willing to do so. Okay.
So technically, we don't have to have, do we have to have a vote on the two candidates, or can we just make a motion?
Is
Somebody-
one withdrawing? Is
You're
going to withdraw your nomination or not?
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment. I threw another candidate out there because typically we only have one, and it gives us an option whether we take it or not, okay?
Okay. So since this election, I'd prefer that we do a raise of hands, right? So we could have a more of a ballot type. So you ready to count? Okay. So, Dan, you want to go first?
No, you go.
I think, okay. All right, all those in favor of Pete Meitzner being the chair for the coming year, raise your hand. Okay, well,
Easy vote.
it looks unanimous, so, all right, we're moving on, so, thank you. We're off to another year. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 4, which is,
You got to do vice chair.
thank you. Okay. We're going to move on to accept nominations for the vice chair. Are there any?
Nominate Dan Wajak.
Okay. There's been a nomination for Dan. Are there any other nominations from the floor? To stop? Okay. Claire, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
And
Thank you, Ann. There's a motion on the floor to cease nominations for the vice chair. Any questions? Being none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, ayes carry. So the nominations are over or closed.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So there being only one, do we still have to have a vote, I wonder?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. So we're going to do a vote for the nomination of Dan Wojak to be the vice chair in the coming year. All in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous for the record. So Dan, congratulations.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Did you mention about, so for the record, a clarification, we looked up the bylaws. Did you mention that yet?
No, I didn't know that.
Okay.
I think that's coming up here.
Item 5? Oh, okay. Okay, all right. Then we'll go to item number 4, which is public comment. At this time, anybody from the public would like to address the policy body with any comments? Looking around the room, don't see any. So we'll move on to item 5, new business items. Phil, we asked Phil to update or to look into the bylaws, which you all know needs to happen once in a while to get some clarification. And Phil has something to report about the bylaws related to the Technical Advisory Committee, commonly known as the TAC.
Over the past few months, we have generated a lot of reports on trends and how things could be changing. some of the most significant changes that we've seen in a long time. And we've kind of kicked this around a little bit to adding members to the TAC to make kind of the decision-making process and the recommendation process to the TBB more holistic and kind of more robust as we go along. The staff report lists all of the voting members of the TAC and the ex officio members in the TAC. And because of those changes in the trends and because of what we'll be looking at in the future, we would like to add 5 members to the TAC. Would be 1 economist because of the costs of doing business of building infrastructure, and especially for maintaining and preserving. A technologist because of the smart community type work that's being done now in terms of information technology and setting up the different things that will make traffic move faster and better. Put an urban land use planner and development trend expert, public health representative because public health is impacted by transportation and infrastructure construction and maintenance. And also because of the potential for increase in freight traffic, the rail traffic especially. In some instances, it's been projected to be up to an 80% increase in train freight traffic, of putting a railroad freight representative on the TAC committee. We're also recommending that last year in September, we talked about changing the name of the Technical Advisory Committee to the Transportation Advisory Committee. And that again is mainly because there's so many different things that are going on with transportation-related planning and the technical expertise that's required. We also recommended that staff develop some recommendations for membership of the 5 different fields and report those to the executive committee, and the executive committee would then bring that back to this board for consideration. But we are recommending those changes take place as soon as possible, if that would be acceptable to the body. Questions?
Well, I have one. So explain so these would be appointees, or we
Yes.
take applications. They're not
No, we take
Staff?
applications and try to get the people who are most interested in helping with planning the transportation systems and mode choices for the future.
I have one question, and I either misread it or got a gap here, but everything through here, as you add these people and as they're selected or go through the executive committee for selection, that will be brought back to the policy body for approval.
Right, that's what I
So-
stated. Yes.
I was reading earlier and I was trying to read back through it and make sure I didn't misread it, and I didn't find it, so, okay.
These are all unpaid positions as well, so.
And voting also, voting members?
Richard? Yes.
Yeah, you might be surprised, but I have some concerns about this.
I'm surprised.
But I did vote for you to remain chairman, so. I stuck it to you there, didn't I? But anyway, I just, I mean, these are the sorts of people I think we look to and ask when needed, but I wouldn't necessarily add them to the TAC, and specifically the urban land use planning, public health representative, for a variety of reasons. I know we've had some presentations, some of which were in the public health, but having come from the medical community, I didn't say anything at the time. I thought they were just kind of presentations, but some of those presentations were, well, they were terribly flawed and may have given a false impression. And so I don't kind of like the direction that we're going there with that sort of stuff, but I'd rather just get advice from these people when necessary and keep it where it is today. Also, I'd like to have the opportunity to meet with some people that I'd like to have their input on, specifically the builders on this. I haven't had time to do. I spoke with them briefly about this, but there's just some concerns there. So,
Okay. Anybody comments? Go ahead, Jen.
So, Phil, on these all make sense to me. Are these, as you look around the country and look at other transportation bodies and planning groups related to transportation, are these fairly common positions?
They're becoming more so.
Planning bodies are moving in this
Yes.
direction and incorporating these areas of,
A lot of
Experience and expertise.
departments have these kind of people on staff.
oh, actually on staff. Okay.
You know, this would be I wish Rick Backlund was here to comment from the Fed area. Mike Moriarty, do you have any comments from KDOT perspective about other MPOs in the state and whatever?
Thinking of the MPOs in Kansas, I'm not sure any of them have taken this big of a step quite yet. I don't believe Mark has anybody, or Topeka, or Lawrence, or any of them, but from the public health sector, so I think that's interesting. I would say within the MPOs that, we work with in Kansas, this would be the first from these 5 areas. I think that's probably a good thing.
Okay, I guess what I'd have a question. This is, it looks like this is a little bit new news to the policy bodies, so to speak. Is there a time frame where we could consider bringing this back in a month so we could all digest a little more?
That's what you would like to do?
And it would, I don't know how the feeling of the body would be. We can move on this item today, or we can, I know Richard would like to visit with other people. I hadn't visited with, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Mike, on KDOT's perspective, but like I said, I mentioned before that Rick, I'd like to visit with Rick a little bit from our feds.
You want a motion to table it for a month?
Well, I'd consider that, yeah.
I mean,
If that's the
what
will
we
of the
wanna
body, right?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Tom, motion, and Richard, any other discussion about this?
I do have,
Yeah.
this group needs to evaluate this. Each one of us need to evaluate how we feel on it. I think over the next 30 days, we're going to be back where we're at today, so, okay.
I think any of you that have some feedback or some questions, I would encourage you to get with Phil directly, or you could call me as well, and I'll get with Phil. The executive body will probably have a meeting between now and next August, so we can also, so that'd be about halfway between. We can see what the status is as well. Okay. Any other dialogue? There's a motion and a second to move this item, to table this item for 30 days to the next meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, the motion carries. We will hold off on item 5A and re-review it at the next meeting. The next action, the Transportation Improvement Program TIP Amendment. Mr. Jason O'Brien,
Good afternoon.
welcome to WAMPO.
There's a lot here, but at the end of the day, this item is really no more or less than another TIP amendment. In terms of your approval, this is a special TIP amendment that comes 1 month ahead of our next regularly scheduled amendment. The purpose is to amend the approved Planning Walkable Places program into the Transportation Improvement Program. In order to stay on schedule and make sure that our local state agreement is completed in time, we couldn't quite wait for the regularly scheduled amendment. So that's why this is coming to you today. The program and the funding mechanism are already approved by the policy body. So what we're bringing you today is the budget information that will go into the Transportation Improvement Program. And we also wanted to show you the list of projects. I also would like to give just a very short update about the program itself. From our perspective, it's been a big success so far. We've been surprised by the very high level of engagement of our member communities and by the quality of the project applications. 16 member jurisdictions have applied for 20 projects, which is somewhat more than anticipated. There were some early worries that project sponsors would get tripped up by some complex eligibility requirements, especially our applicants who've never done a WAMPO project before. But at this point, most of that is already behind us, and we've gotten through it together just fine. There were some concerns about scheduling early on, but after working closely with KDOT and our applicants, we're now looking pretty good. I do want to show you some numbers today, just to give you a feel for the scale of things here. So this deals with our year-end balance funds. These are essentially leftover funds after our construction projects have been funded. A typical range for a year-end balance is 1 million to 3 million. And a figure we kind of tossed out earlier this year a few times was $500,000 to 1 million. That specifically was the amount of the year-end balance that we've been in danger of losing, that we've had to roll over, that we've had to ask our state partners to roll over for us the past several years, and we're told they're no longer able to do that. So that's the amount that we consider to be at risk. So 1 to 3 million is typical. This year, the balance is 2.6 million. Federal funds requested for planning walkable places projects, around 1.3 million, with administrative costs, a small percentage of that, for a total request of about 1.33 million. I do want to get into a little bit of fine print on the administrative cost component. This will cover the cost of WAMPO staff time and staff time for our fiscal agent, which is the City of Wichita, to administer some of the financial aspects of the program. These funds are federally eligible, so for the most part, they'll be paid with federal funds, with a small portion to be paid by our local project sponsors. Project sponsors will jointly pay this match, and everybody can expect to pay less than $1,000 per project, so it's pretty nominal. And of course, members without projects awarded will not be asked to contribute to this local match. And the grand total for that is just a touch over $9,000 for the whole program. That's the local match portion. All right. You should have a list of projects in front of you. It's one of the two sheets. This is in no particular order. It's a list of all the projects that were sort of finalists for the Planning Walkable Places program. Their names and costs are there. There was a little bit too much information for this to be readable on the screen here, so that's why it's printed out. The first thing, we then want to get into process a little bit for how these projects came to be in front of you today, and to show you how they've been beat up and how there's been a good process here. The first thing we did was in the first quarter of the year, establish eligibility with KDOT and with FHWA. Anytime you get into a new area of work, which this is fairly new, it creates a fair amount of work determining what's actually eligible, interpreting federal laws and policies, and then figuring out how oversight and management are going to be handled between the MPO, state partners, and our federal partners. So we started tackling that during the first quarter of the year. The open call for projects to all our member jurisdictions was in mid-May. And before and a little bit after the call, the staff and our state partners did some early screening for eligibility to make sure projects met minimum standards, and to just make sure there was nothing terribly off target for the program. And not all projects under consideration survived that process. I believe there were 27 or 28. There are 20 moved on from that stage. There was a sort of a phase of this that was meant to be helpful in addition to being critical. So the WAMPO staff and KDOT worked with some of our project sponsors, requested some revisions and clarifications, just to make sure that no good projects got left out that just need a little touching up. And we wanted to steer people away from anything that might become an eligibility problem later on. The call closed in mid-June. We had 20 projects surviving. We established a project review committee to review all the projects, and their charter was really to make sure that, first of all, that the program and the projects were meeting some reasonable regional need, and that we just had a reasonably coherent program, and that some kind of a standard was evident. They also did project scoring and ranking, just to have a good process. At the end of the day, the Walkable Places Review Committee recommended for funding 19 of the 20 eligible projects. The project that received no recommendation is one of a group of Wichita projects, the Parking and Multimodal Plan. The grant program does contain sufficient funding to do this project, but the review committee was unable to reach a consensus about it. And that did not revolve around whether or not the project had merit or was a good project, but really around whether it was a good fit for this program. So that was the question. And just to be clear, what they finally did was agree to disagree and simply made no recommendation about the project one way or the other. And I think as far as that, we would be comfortable enough moving forward. Of course, that's your prerogative. Some ground level facts, there is sufficient funding within the program to do the project, and doing it would not displace any other member jurisdiction's project.
If I could interrupt just a second. We did receive the service agreement with KDOT, and all of the money is provided in that agreement, all 1.585 million. So I would recommend to you that all of these projects that are listed, even though one could not reach a total consensus, that all of the projects be funded. Soon, not take a chance on losing that much money if they can't reach some kind of an agreement.
Yep. Tom?
From the tax side of it, we had quite a bit of dialogue on this, and there was some discussion about moving a bigger project forward and not funding any of these. And during that meeting, it was determined that we would fund these and take the residual funds that are left over and fund the next project out of the next fiscal year. And so that's where we left. This recommendation is that these be funded too from TAC. We ran into a thing this year where we were on the high side of funding availability because a program got canceled. I think a county program got canceled. I don't want to go into details, but we ended up with $1.5 million that we wouldn't have had. And so otherwise we'd have had $1 million like we expected. So kind of threw some gasoline on the fire there at the end of the year with a lot of money, so.
Richard?
Questions. Could someone send me a copy of this electronically?
Yes, absolutely.
Kind of talk a little bit more in detail what a parking and multinodal plan entailed, as well as the walkable development plan will entail. And I'll just comment that $1.3 million, I would have supported the idea to move it forward on another project, which I just think that's a better use of this sort of money. But nevertheless, I want to know some more details on these.
I understand, Commissioner. There are people in the room today who can discuss those projects in more detail. Would you like to call them?
That, or they could start by just sending me the proposal itself. I'll read it, and then I'll call them if I have any questions. If that'd be easier.
We can sure do that.
That being said, I guess maybe I'd like to know more about, well, no, I probably won't vote yes on any of it anyway, but for those who, we might want to have a discussion about the parking and multinodal plan, because there was evidently some disagreement on that. I might want to still know a little bit more about that, I guess, as to why some thought it wouldn't be a good fit for this program and others thought it would, or whatever.
Like, I can tell you that the discussion in the committee revolved around whether or not parking was really walkability. And I guess some saw a connection there and others didn't. And they were eventually unable to reach a consensus. So they sort of passed off. Would you like some more discussion, detailed discussion of the projects now from?
Not whatever everybody else wants, but I just have someone send me the proposals or whatever, and I'll look at them.
We can sure do that. And we have more information about the scoring and other processes that were used. We can also send you.
Yeah, I think, Jason, if you would just send that information to Commissioner, that'd be great.
I will.
So the other discussion, for background, any new members, again, often there's an amount that's left over at the end of the year for maybe a bid came in under, the price was under the budget and various reasons, a project's canceled, delayed, whatever. So, and in the past, at least my experience in the past, which is not long, but we were able to roll that money into the next year. And now that with the new rules, I think from the federal down through KDOT, right, Mike, is that you kind of need to have projects. And earlier this year, we discussed allowing all the communities within the WAMPO region to be able to fund things that they may not have been able to fund normally, mainly to do with some of the things that are important to their communities related to bike pads, wayfinding, etc. And so, if you recall, we had a lot of dialogue about that earlier in the year about prioritizing that versus pre-funding or accelerating split projects on roads. And it was the vote of the policy body to allow these kind of projects, special requests, whatever you want to call it, that are studies to be prioritized, and then the road projects secondary. So this kind of follows along that directive that the policy body had sent. Am I saying this about right? Okay, all right.
I'm gonna help you out here.
Okay, Tom.
This has been vetted through a task team, it's been through
Microphone.
TAC. KDOT at several levels has looked at it, and recommendations come to this board that either up or down, money moved, money moved. I'm gonna make a motion that we do the Special Transportation Improvement Program TIP amendment,
I will second it.
including the plan that was put out of the TAC.
Okay. So Tom motioned and Claire seconded the motion to accept this amendment. Any questions? I have one in that. So the balance of
The
the
residual money that's left over will go to there's already
Projects.
been a project looked at and can come forward. It's already in the process in 2018. For those that may not be familiar with this, all this money goes away at the end of September. And so we have to act, and because of the processes you have to go through KDOT, we can't get any big projects forward. And it's an opportunity this way to spend it a different way this year, so.
so we can approve this, and then the whatever the project that fills the road project would be proposed, would be included in next month's meeting.
I think the next project up, and Janet's smiling, it's going to be a East Side Wichita project, so it'll get pulled forward out of 2018, so Pete's the one that ought to be smiling, so.
Actually, we'll come forward with a couple of different options for you to consider.
I think that would be good if we had options, and any of those options would be helpful.
Point here is, we're going to spend some money in the little cities and make it through the KDOT process, so that we
Is
don't
your,
lose any
is your
money.
motion, though, is to
My
clarify,
motion is that we
just to approve
accept
these?
this
But there'll be
amendment,
another motion at
amendment.
another time about,
next project.
yeah, balance, what to do with the balance. Okay.
Okay.
My
All the
motion
questions.
is on how we're going to spend this money, and part of it's here, and the rest of it will be forthcoming.
And that way, it would allow the cities that are involved in these to get started with get their machines rolling.
If we
Go
had
ahead,
any
Dan.
discussion for future years, and I support this, but getting that 33-month down to where it's more usable. I mean, so if we do come up with a fairly significant amount of money, that we could use it on projects instead of talking about projects.
We'll look into that.
I just like, if, we just need to enter that discussion with those folks and see
Yeah.
if we can streamline that a little bit.
This is a weird situation. It's an
Right.
unusual year where
Right.
we've got something that went away and we got more money than we normally would have, so.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my question is, this motion that we're doing, are we talking about the one, approving the 1,585,000 or the 1,268,000? Because I heard earlier that you said something about we had enough money to fund it all, so that's what I was trying to figure out.
Here, on today, we're looking at these projects, and then the residual money will be spent too, except that it's going to be determined at the next meeting, I believe. Help me out, Phil.
It's the approval of the 1.585 million 1.268 is the federal share, but there'll also be 1.267 left that we'll bring forward the options for you to consider at the next meeting.
Okay.
WAMPO funds are 1.268.
That's the federal request. The total project are 1.585.
Right, but is your motion to approve 100% of the project cost at 1.585, or is your motion
It would
to?
be at 80%. Well, how do
Because
I
That
want to do it?
that was my
1.585.
question.
Yes, I know,
Yeah.
right.
The city, the community is still, I mean, this is. total.
20%.
So
Yeah,
you're gonna be,
20%.
$60,000 per project is the city responsibility.
Right.
I mean, that's the difference between the 1.5
That-
and the 1.
That was my question,
Yeah, I
yes.
thought that.
I thought that we were only approving 80%, but when you mentioned the 1.5 million, but that's for the other projects,
That's what I
correct?
read.
Okay, no, that's fine.
80%, right?
Thank you.
Okay. We clear? Claire, we clear, Claire? Okay. All right. No, that's right. Okay, so there's a motion and a second on the floor to approve this amendment as proposed. Any other discussion? Being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I could have your attention for just one more moment, I would just clarify that we will be bringing options to the Transportation Advisory Committee as far as spending the remaining balance funds
Yes.
after the Planning Walkable Places program. And the two main options will be, one will be to advance schedule reimbursements for existing projects that are split. And the other option, and this is just following the letter of the policy approved in May for year-end balance funds, would be to fund a package potentially of some feasible technology and transit projects that could be ready to go this year. And again, the reason for looking at those types of projects is because unlike new construction projects, funds can be committed to them very quickly, and time's always the issue this late in the fiscal year. So those are just, that's sort of a preview of the type of options we'll be discussing.
Okay. Thanks for
Thank
clarifying.
you.
So I'm glad we're going to end up seeing options that we'll be able to choose from at the next policy body meeting. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 6, planning considerations, automated vehicles. Mr. Upchurch, welcome.
Thank you. So something a little different to talk about for you. I'm here today to talk to you about automated vehicles, cars that drive themselves. This is something that's been in the news quite a bit lately, and that potentially has very large and far-reaching impacts for our transportation system. So it's something that WAMPO needs to be aware of and to keep an eye on. So I've been following this for quite a while, and I was at a conference earlier this year, went to a session on automated vehicles, and had the first speaker get up, and he said, automated vehicles will be here faster than you think. A little later in that same session, we had a different speaker get up, and he said, automated vehicles will take longer than you think. And they're probably both right, because automated vehicles aren't just a single thing. It's either automated or it's not. They're a spectrum. And on one end of that spectrum is no automation at all. This is the car as we have known it for the past 100+ years. The other end of that spectrum is full automation. This is a vehicle that can drive itself. It can go anywhere a car can legally go, doesn't require a human driver, doesn't have a steering wheel, doesn't have pedals, no human intervention at all in the actual driving process. Now, how do we move along this spectrum? So from sort of our current no automation all the way to these automated vehicles. Well, the first step is what's called driver assistance. And these are systems you can get on many production cars today. Things like smart cruise control, where the car will track the vehicle in front of you and match its speed. Automated braking, emergency braking, where it will use radar to detect obstacles in the road and brake before you hit them. Lane keeping assistance, where if you drift out of the lane, the vehicle will guide you back into it, back to the center, and keep you between the white lines. So those sorts of systems are driver assistance. The next step beyond that is what you might call partial automation. And essentially, this involves taking those driver assistance systems that are available as separate systems today and integrating them into one unified system. So it would have more than one function. It would do both the smart cruise control and the automated lane keeping. And these are available today on certain high-end vehicles. An example would be the Tesla Autopilot. You also see them on a few higher-end vehicles from the more expensive manufacturers. But like all technology, this is stuff that will trickle down to mass-market cars probably in the next few years. But between this partial automation and full automation, there's still a very big gap. You have to remember in partial automation, the driver is still in control. It's still the driver's responsibility to be aware of surroundings, to have their hand on the wheel, and to react to any events that the automated system can't handle. And there's quite a big gap between that and the full automation where you don't even need a driver at all. Well, how do we get across that gap? Good way to think about this. I am guessing that a majority of the people in this room have probably ridden in an automated vehicle, even if you might not think about it that way. You know, if you've flown out of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, or Denver International, or Heathrow, or visited the University of West Virginia, they all have these automated people mover systems. We've been building these for 40 plus years. And though you might not think of them like it, they are automated vehicles. And the reason we were able to build automated vehicles like this, even with the technology of the 1970s, is they're in very controlled environments. They have this dedicated guideway. Well, what's the most similar environment to that we have on the roads today? Probably a freeway. Now, it's a lot more dynamic than a dedicated automated people mover guideway, but still, compared to your average surface street, it's a fairly controlled environment. You don't have to worry about bicyclists or pedestrians. Everybody's going in the same direction at about the same speed. Rather than people pulling out of driveways or having intersections, there are designated locations where you get on and off. It's a fairly controlled environment. And you can build systems much more easily to deal with a freeway than you can with a surface street. And indeed, there are experimental systems today that will do this. A company called Auto did an automated test run in Colorado last year. They actually did a beer delivery. And this really was a truly automated vehicle. If you look closely at the picture there, you can see the guy in the truck is not sitting in the driver's seat. He's back in the sleeper cab. So the truck is driving itself without human intervention, without even human backup right there ready to go. This is a real automated vehicle. Now the caveat is these sorts of systems right now will only work on the freeway. But if you think about that, that can still be fairly revolutionary. You can totally upend the trucking industry just with systems that will only work on the freeway, especially long-distance trucking. So this is an example of what's called an operational design domain. An operational design domain is essentially where, when, and how an automated vehicle can operate, what conditions the automated system is designed to operate under. So it only works on the freeway is one example. The other piece of low-hanging fruit for an operational design domain, So the operational design domain is essentially how we get across this gap. Rather than going from a vehicle that requires continuous human supervision to full automation directly, you start with a narrow range of situations where the automated system can work, and then you gradually expand that. So automation in some conditions. So I talked about freeways as one piece of low-hanging fruit when it comes to operational design domains. The other is to build a system that will work over a limited geographic area. Essentially, you put a whole bunch of effort into very carefully mapping a small region, like a college campus, for instance. And then your automated vehicle doesn't have to worry about finding its way through the environment. It's already been mapped in very great detail. It knows it down to every curve, every curb, every jog in the road. So all the vehicle has to worry about is essentially movable obstacles, people, other vehicles. And that's a much easier problem to solve again than trying to both navigate and deal with movable obstacles. So examples where this might apply, again, college campuses. This is one in Switzerland where they're testing this little automated shuttle, perhaps corporate environments, a corporate campus or a factory complex, something like that. You can expand this though. The next level is to take this out to an entire city. You might do a whole city, map it again in great detail, and then deploy a fleet of automated shared ride vehicles. This is something that would be very appealing to a company like Uber or Lyft because their biggest expense is the drivers. If they could put a bunch of effort into mapping a city and then roll out an automated vehicle fleet, they could repay that effort by lowering their costs a bunch. So that's probably the other low-hanging fruit when it comes to operational design domain. But gradually this is going to grow and grow until your vehicle can navigate under any sort of circumstance or any geographic area. Now, if you have a limited operational design domain, there's this issue of what happens if you should suddenly exceed it. One thing where automated vehicle systems today tend to have trouble with is road construction. They have trouble finding their way through that. Frankly, I've seen some human drivers have some trouble finding their way through that. Other one where they have a lot of problems is bad weather conditions. Most of these systems today rely heavily on machine vision. They're looking for things like lane lines, road striping. And you start to lay down snow, that has some negative effects. So what happens when you suddenly encounter snow or road construction or some other condition where the vehicle can't operate? Well, there's kind of two options for this. Number one is what I'll call the human take the wheel option. The vehicle just immediately falls back to the human driver. Now, there are some issues with this. I certainly know when I'm driving, even when I'm driving, but maybe not paying full attention to the driving task, just sort of cruising down the road, and suddenly I encounter something unexpected. I'm not really at my best in dealing with that. I can only imagine what it's going to be like if I'm doing something else entirely, and then suddenly the vehicle says, hey, you got to drive now right away. So the other option, and maybe the option that's more difficult from the technical side but accommodates the human driver a little better, is transition to a minimal risk condition, which is essentially automated vehicle will on its own pull over, come to a stop and say, hey, human driver, you need to take over and start driving now. And then at your leisure, you can start the driving task, pull out into traffic, and deal with whatever the automated vehicle couldn't. Again, more technically difficult, but probably accommodates the capabilities of us as human drivers a little better. So I've been talking about this in terms of a spectrum. The Society of Automotive Engineers has taken this and sliced it up into a series of levels. And you may encounter this, so if someone says they're talking about a level 4 automated vehicle, it's a particular spot along that spectrum. So level 0 is our no automation, the car as we've known it for the past 100 years. Level 1 is driver assistance, so something with smart cruise control. Level 2 is partial automation, something like the Tesla Autopilot. Level 3 is automation in some conditions, so for a certain operational design domain, but it will immediately fall back to a human driver if it needs to. Level 4, again, a certain operational design domain, certain conditions, but it can do that to transition to a minimal risk condition rather than going straight to the human. And then level 5 is the holy grail here, the full automation where you don't need a human driver or a steering wheel or pedals. So we had these two fellows at the conference. Automated vehicles will be here sooner than you think. That's probably true. Level 4 is probably 5 years away or less. You'll start to see these vehicles that can work under certain conditions. Again, I think freeways and localized shuttles are probably going to be the first, but it will gradually expand from there. But the guy who said it'll take longer than you think is probably right too. That holy grail of a fully automated vehicle that can drive itself in any conditions, that is a very hard problem to solve, and that's probably decades away. So what are the implications for a planning agency like WAMPO? What should we be thinking about in our planning processes? Well, talk about this in the medium term, say 5 to 10 years from now. We're going to see these vehicles that are limited to certain operational design domains, certain situations. And even those are going to be a very small fraction of the vehicle fleet. Even once these start coming out, only a small percentage of the new cars will be automated vehicles. And then you still have 20 or 30 years worth of older cars on the road that are entirely non-automated. So the transition is going to take a while, but the percentage of automated vehicles out there will increase over time. Well, what does this mean for us? The first one, and the big one that people have hopes for automated vehicles, is improving safety. We kill about 40,000 people on our nation's highways every year, about 50 of them here in the Wichita area. and many times that are seriously injured. So huge costs in human life to our transportation system. Most of those deaths can ultimately be attributed to human error. So if we can build automated systems that are better than human drivers, we can hopefully drive down those numbers. And better than human drivers doesn't necessarily mean perfect. It just means better than the rest of us. And frankly, that's not always a very high bar. Another implication is going to be lower the cost of travel time. And I have cost in scare quotes there because I'm not talking about dollars and cents. I'm talking about time. Right now, when we get behind the wheel, there's only a limited number of productive things we can do. You know, you can listen to the radio, you can maybe have a conversation, but much beyond that, you're probably getting into stuff you shouldn't do while driving. With an automated vehicle, you can do pretty much anything. You can, sit there, surf the internet, read a book, write a letter, whatever you want. You don't need to pay any attention to the road in a truly automated vehicle. So it essentially lowers the cost of spending that time behind the wheel. Well, basic economics, what do people do when the cost of something goes down? They do more of it. So if driving is less of a burden on your time, you're going to take more trips. You may drive longer distances. Right now, if I chose to live 60 miles from work, that's about 2 hours every day that I have to spend behind the wheel and can't do much. If I have an automated vehicle, suddenly that hour driving each way, I can do other stuff while I'm doing that. I can make that part of my workday and, respond to all my email before I get into the office. Or maybe I can make that part of my recreation, spend the time surfing the web or, on the phone with family, that kind of thing. It makes living those long distances away a lot more appealing. So one thing that'll contribute to urban sprawl, people will be more likely to live much further out. It'll also increase the number of cars on the road because people are driving further. Now, here in Wichita, we're in a fairly good situation. We have very little congestion, lots of excess capacity. We can absorb that additional amount of people on the road. In places that have congestion problems, Dallas or Los Angeles, automated vehicles are just going to make things worse, at least at first. Probably also going to see a transition to transportation as a service. I talked about one of the low-hanging fruit in terms of your operational design domain is to a vehicle that's limited to a particular city that has been mapped very well. That's not very appealing to me as an individual car owner. I might want to go on a road trip somewhere, but it's very appealing to a service like Uber or Lyft, where they could go in and essentially one city at a time. The vehicles are never going to leave that city, but they're very useful within that one city. So we're probably going to see less individual car ownership, though there'll still be some, and more people taking services like that, whether it's Uber or Lyft or services that are set up by auto manufacturers or entirely new companies. Flip side of this, we will probably see reduced demand for traditional transit. Right now, people take transit for a variety of reasons, but a couple of the big ones might be economic. That's what they can afford. Might be that they don't have the ability to drive a vehicle. They're too young to drive or disabled or getting old enough they feel they shouldn't be driving. Or they might be people who, again, just don't want to spend that time behind the wheel. They want to be able to work while they're on the way to their destination. But automated vehicles are going to tend to siphon off those last two categories. So this is going to place some pressure on traditional transit agencies to adapt. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, this will bring major changes to the trucking industry. It's probably going to start with long-haul trucking. I can foresee a day 10 years from now where a company that wants to ship something from, say, Wichita down to Denver, they'll have a driver drive it from the loading dock to the freeway on-ramp. Driver will get out and the semi will go on down the road on its merry way without a driver in it. It'll meet a driver down there in Dallas. Driver will get in the car as the truck gets off the freeway and drive it to its final destination. Long-haul trucking will be the cutting edge here, but it's going to percolate down even to local routes and deliveries and further in the future. And finally, sort of getting down to the nuts and bolts here, we're going to see some demand for better striping and signage. The systems, at least to start with, as I've said, they rely pretty heavily on machine vision, looking to recognize signs and road striping and that sort of thing. And someone who has just paid a bunch of money for a new high-end car with this system installed into it isn't going to be very happy if their system, automated system, keeps shutting off because your road striping is so bad. So they're going to call up and complain, and as elected officials, some of those complaints are going to come to you. So be prepared. You'll probably start seeing that within the next couple of years. Now, over the longer term, talking now 20 or 30 years out, this is when you'll start to see those fully automated vehicles, the ones that don't even need a human driver in the car. It's also when automated vehicles will start to become a majority of the vehicle fleet. Even if the fully automated ones are new, you'll still have 20 or 30 years of production of these vehicles that are automated under some conditions. So probably a majority of cars on the road will be automated in some way or another. The implications of this can be pretty profound. For one thing, we can probably increase road capacity without actually building any more asphalt or concrete. We talked about how automated vehicles increase demand to start with, but eventually they will increase capacity. Right now, we build and operate our highways under the assumption that we have to deal with the limitations of a human driver. So you got to leave plenty of space between your car and the next car in front of you so you don't rear-end them if they suddenly stop. But on the other hand, an automated vehicle that has reaction time in microseconds and can talk to the vehicle in front of it using those connected vehicle technologies we talked about last month, know when the vehicle in front of it brakes and brake at exactly the same time, you can run those 2 or 3 feet apart. That allows you to fit more vehicles on the road. It also allows you to save on fuel. Essentially, this is like drafting in NASCAR. You can expend less fuel if you're very close behind the vehicle in front of you. Not safe with a human driver, but it's something that can be done with an automated vehicle. You can also do things like make the lanes narrower and fit more lanes on the highway if you have automated vehicles that'll stay straight and true right down the center of the lane. You may even be able, once you transition to a fully automated vehicle fleet, get rid of traffic signals. If you think about it, traffic signals are fairly inefficient. You're stopping the people on the cross street, bringing them to a complete stop while you go through, and then they have to accelerate up again. That takes lots of time and lots of fuel. If you've got an all-automated vehicle fleet, vehicles can basically talk to each other and negotiate. Okay, you speed up a bit, I'll slow down a bit, and then I'll cut right through the intersection behind you. May not even need traffic signals, make the system more efficient. Other area you might not think about that could lead to some big changes is in parking. You know, right now the assumption is if I go to a workplace or a shopping venue or a sports arena, the assumption is I'm probably going to arrive in my own car, and that car needs to stay there as long as I'm there. With automated vehicles, that's not necessarily true. I could, pull up to work, get out, and then if I came in my own personal automated vehicle, it could drive off to some remote parking lot. If I came in a shared ride automated vehicle, something like Uber, I get out and it drives off to its next pickup. There's no need for a parking spot there at my workplace to accommodate that vehicle throughout the day. So rather than surrounding most of our major workplaces and shopping venues with a sea of asphalt and lots of parking spaces, you might have something that looks more like the taxi stand or the drop-off in front of a hotel. Just spaces for people to get out of their cars and have them drive off or wait for them as they pull up. So oddly enough, automated vehicles could end up making our urban areas much denser and more walkable. And this may seem very far off in the future, but if this is 20 or 30 years out, there are people today building parking structures and selling 30-year bonds to pay for them. What are the economics of a parking garage going to look like 25 years from now? Something we need to start thinking about now, even if this is 20 or 30 years out. And finally, this has the potential to really cause a vast increase in mobility for people who don't have the ability to drive. Right now, if you're too young to have a driver's license or physically disabled or too old to be driving, you're really very limited. You're very dependent on other people to get around. Whereas with automated vehicles, your physical or legal ability to drive or not really doesn't affect your mobility that much. So potentially some pretty huge societal changes there, which are going to be very important, as we've heard about in these trends presentations, that our population is going to get much older on average over the next few decades. So that's automated vehicles. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Yep.
I know it's not the scope of what we do here, but in the seminars you went to, did you see any application of this in golf carts? That'd be a good way to keep them where they're supposed to be and save the course.
I have not heard anything about automated golf carts, but I'm sure that's coming sooner or later.
Keep them on the cart paths.
Tell you how far out your next shot is, like your watch. Okay, hey, that's interesting stuff.
I do have a
Nope.
question.
Yeah, James, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's right.
With the unpredictability of a human driver and automated vehicles being on the road at the same time, I meet with an engineering group. They banter about some of these issues, and even on the national level through professional engineering organizations, there's a big debate on this issue. Do you see at any point to where governments, local governments, state, federal governments will mandate that you have to have an automated car? That's one of the debates, one of the concerns that I hear.
It certainly is. I think broad mandates like that are probably quite a ways out, even further than the 20 to 30 year time frame I was talking about, just based on how long it takes for our vehicle fleets to turn over. Since we haven't even started making really automated vehicles yet, figure how long the average car is on the road before you can start mandating something like that. What I think you would see sooner than that is maybe automated vehicle dedicated lanes, sort of like we have an HOV lane today or a toll lane, a lane just for automated vehicles. And again, you can do stuff like make the lanes narrower and pack more vehicles into it if they're all automated. The sort of broad-based, everything has to be automated, you can't do any manual driving at all, that's probably, like I said, if it happens, would be at least 40 or 50 years out, I would think.
A revolt. I can see a revolt.
Well, not to put too fine a point on it, but I think what it may take to get to that point is people who have grown up just with automated vehicles. Once these start becoming commonplace, you'll have a generation, most of whom, unless they have learning to drive a vehicle manually, you'll be like being part of the Society for Creative Anachronism or something, or getting involved in fencing. That's probably the point it's going to have to get to before they would mandate automated vehicles, is my guess, but my crystal ball is cloudy, so.
Bob.
I've got one question about future liabilities. Have there been any discussions surrounding that? Because obviously with safety being a predominant issue, one could presume that insurance companies are going to take a hit as a result. But then again, there'll be product liability issues with regards to these automated vehicles.
Yeah.
What about the balance of liability and assignment of risk?
There's been plenty of discussion on that. Actually, at that same conference, I went to a different session where there was an attorney talking about where he saw liability issues associated with automated vehicles going. And I think a couple of things. The points that he made, there were kind of three of them. In general, he would expect more liability to shift to the manufacturers, since they're the ones responsible for designing and building the software and all the sensors and stuff. But he thought that would be sort of tempered by the inertia in the system. We have a system today where the liability really rests with insurance companies that are paid for by the individual vehicle owners. And it's going to take a long time to get away from that system if we ever do. Kind of the third factor in there is companies like Uber and Lyft and any of these shared ride services. They will probably essentially self-insure. They'll may make the vehicles themselves, they may buy them from the vehicle manufacturers, but they would essentially buy the liability along with them as a way of reducing their costs of acquiring the vehicles, and then they would be big enough to absorb any judgments in the event of an accident. And of course, one other thing he pointed out is that legal changes like this, you're not going to be pioneering new legal theories over every fender bender. It's only really very serious accidents, usually ones involving death or serious injury, where it's worth going for the deep pockets essentially versus just getting whatever payout the insurer will offer. So there probably will be some changes. They probably aren't going to be radical or very quick.
To show you, there are some pretty significant testing of automated vehicles going on right now. Uber has a fleet of automated vehicles operating in Pittsburgh right now. And the University of Michigan is also testing automated vehicles on campus now, moving students back and forth. So a lot of questions like that will be answered in terms of liability and the safety factor and those kinds of things will be a part of that study, or those studies.
All right. You know, noteworthy to me is on the Wichita Council is that we have a lot of dialogue about infrastructure, building, parking support structures for new business. We've got one with Cargill coming up, and so to think in terms of parking structures that are expensive, and are they 25-year plans?
Yeah,
Kinda,
there are
yeah.
actually some places that are looking at making sure parking structures are potentially convertible to other uses. You know, block off the ramps and use it as office space or industrial space, something like that, just as a way of future-proofing against 25 years down the line having vastly less demand for parking.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? Feedback?
One
Yep,
quick,
Carl.
what energy source potentially is the most likely for these automated cars?
Based on what I've read, most people think that the shift to automation is probably going to be accompanied to a shift to electric vehicles, is what I think is, that's what I read out there is most likely. There are other options out there, but that seems to be, at least for the short to medium term, the one that's coming up as most the consensus.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great presentation. We keep getting reminders about this autonomous cars. Okay, next up is the committee and partnership reports. First off, as the executive committee, we did meet this month. We talked, we had a good discussion about the suballocated fund discussion that we just had and voted on. Phil, we talked about proposal for a workshop for the policy body that Phil's going to cover. Talked about our relationship with BREG and REAP and other organizations. And with that, if you would bear with me, remember we discussed that we wanted to have a little presentation about what is WAMPO. We saw that BREG had a meeting with the Sedgwick County area transportation section. It's been Blueprint for Regional Economic Growth is BREG. It's a 10-county private-driven organization. We had a great meeting there, and their question is, what is WAMPO? And as you all know, very few people know what WAMPO is. I think the city council in Wichita has various members, so we know, and Sedgwick County has had of their 5 commissioners they've had, so they kind of understand, but I don't think most of your councils understand what it is. So what we took is we took the information and kind of revamped it, and I would like to show you I like to say it's a 15-slide presentation. I'll walk us through it. This is very informal, so you'll have it. You'll know what it is. We'll take feedback. We'll continue to improve on it. And so that way you'll have it for your organizations locally or your local chamber or for sure your fellow council members or or whoever. And so when they say, what is WAMPO? So with the assistance of Kathy, I'm going to run through this about 15-slide deal. So if you look to your right, instead of me being up there at the podium, I'll just talk it. So you see all of our member cities are on the left. So there we go. There's our logo. And go to the next one, please. What is WAMPO? There's our mission statement. It kind of makes sense if you read through it. Transportation in roads, highways, transit, rails, bicycles, da da da. And we do these four purple highlighted discussions, prioritization about projects, planning, evaluating, and we become a resource for the community. If you want to go to the next one, and why is WAMPO? I don't think anybody realizes that WAMPOs or MPOs are federally mandated, Title 23, United States. So if you're a population of greater than 50,000 in an area, you're going to be an MPO. The second bullet, the voting members must be elected officials, of which you all are. And the third bullet, there's 6 MPOs in Kansas. They're all listed there. The 2 in purple are us and Mark up in Kansas City. And down at the bottom, if you're greater than 200,000, you're eligible for federal funding. So if you want to, and ours was established in 1965, by the way. Okay, if we go to the next one, please. There's the 6 MPOs in Kansas. You can see ours in relation to the size compared to Mark up there. Mark obviously crosses state lines and multiple counties as well as numerous cities. And then there's the other ones that are MPOs today. We can go to the next one, please. Okay, so this is kind of crucial. How is WAMPO funded? So when you fill up your car, you've heard me say this before, federal gas tax is 18.4 cents, 24 cents on diesel. Your Kansas tax on a gallon is that. The feds gather all that. They disseminate it back to KDOT, and then KDOT distributes it out to the MPOs. And in WAMPO's case, it's estimated to be about $12 million a year for projects. Now, this does not mean our staff, our budget staff is contributed by all of us members. But that's basically what our mission is as far as dollars and cents. So we do play a role in distributing money back into the region based on every time you fill up your gas can. So if we want to go to the next one, please. It's important that your regional MPO identity matters. So when you look at our MPO, what do? Well, as we all know, we build stuff. You know, we're the air capital of the world or whatever, but we are advanced manufacturing. We build stuff, so we have to shift stuff and move it around. So that's what our MPO and our staff for the considers all how do we move stuff. Next, please. A little data here. It's essential to our region. Our airport has a capacity for 500,000 operations annually. I understand it's maybe a capacity of 25-30% today, so it's got room to grow. There's what we do a year in freight, $48 billion, 34 million tons, a lot of railroad miles. You've seen these last 2, average trip time, thanks to the MPO. They looked at the surveys, 14 minutes or less, and our average trips are 10 miles or less in our region. I think Phil told me that the 10-county Bragg region, the projection for 2040 is 75 million tons will be moved in 2040 versus 34 million. So your road conditions are important. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. There's the infamous I-35 corridor. You can see that we're kind of right along there, under a 6-hour drive to all those areas. Gives you a visual. Next one, please. What else does WAMPO do? The famous Move 2040 that we all went through. Again, that first bullet, it's mandated to have a 25-year view. So we soon will be having Move 2045 that'll be done before 2020. Again, second one, it's federally mandated. No, I'm sorry, go back one, please. And then, then we have the TIP program. All right, you can go ahead. So next one is the 4-year TIP review, which is what I think y'all are familiar with. It's a rolling 4-year, basically an assignment of that $12 million that I talked about earlier. So if we go to the next one, this is really recent stuff that's good. We've talked about the project project tracker before. You can get to that on that website anytime. And if you click on the next page, one of the other folders in the project tracker, go ahead and go to the next one. Again, that's the project tracker, and that lists all the projects. You can't really see really well, but you could click on any of those projects on the left-hand side, and it'll give you a tremendous amount of detail. But on the right-hand side, I think what's kind of neat, it tells you those last three columns say federal funding, state funding, and then the local match. So you can, and then they're all various numbers. And even if somebody's 100% locally funded, it's listed in there, even if it doesn't have federal or state matching. So that's a fantastic tool. So with that, the next slide shows you examples. You're familiar, Kellogg and Webb, Kellogg and Greenwich. You can go to the next one, Kellogg and 235. And then our favorite future project that hopefully we'll all see someday is the North Junction. You can go to the next one, please, which, again, that's the summary. So when we're presenting this around Bragg region, the 10-county area, they can see the importance of what the size and scope of fixing that North Junction is. I think KDOT has been very visionary and supportive in knowing that this is probably now that we're straightening out 235 interchange and others, this becomes project number one and priority for us all. So the next is, so they would say, what can we do for you to enhance if we were, so what this shows to the Bragg 10 counties is, even though WAMPO is pretty much Sedgwick County, crosses into some other areas, it really is important for the 10 county region. And I think we showed this in Harvey and Reno County, and it was well received, created quite a dialogue of whatever the value of that. Because you know what, in reality, if you're in Reno County and you live in Reno County and you're filling up your gas can in Hutchinson, well, your tax dollars goes to KDOT and the feds, but they don't receive anything back in direct, other than when they apply for, up to KDOT for some support. So our role, it's kind of an eye opener. Our role is important, it's valid, and so the last one is just again our logo. So we can, if we're all going to be happy with this, we can have it available. We can ship it to you. Again, it's 15 slides. I ran through it, but it's pretty easy. We got some notes that you can have, and then you can share it with your, with either your like I said, your council, your local chapter of millennials or whatever you want to do. So, okay. So that is that. I don't know if that's any comments or questions, but that was a task that we wanted to get out of the way.
Aaron?
Yes.
Could Kathy email that to all of us?
Absolutely. She can. And so the workshop that you were talking about, you want to cover that? You want me to? Okay, the workshop that I referenced earlier was is penciled in for September 12th at 1 o'clock here on the third floor. We plan to bring in a facilitator. The survey is being developed that'll be sent to each to get some feedback prior to the workshop. So if you want to pencil in September 12th, that's the day after September 11th at 1 o'clock here, then, and I think we're targeting a couple hours, 3 hours?
2 to 3 hours.
2 to 3 hours. So that is the extent of the executive committee. That's a little longer than normal, but you have the executive committee report. So with that, I'll hand it over to Tom Jones with the TAC report. Tom?
On the TAC is, we went through the automated vehicle presentation that Chris gave today. So spent quite a bit of time on the Special Transportation Improvement Program, which passed today. Good for us.
Okay. Thanks for that lengthy report, Tom. Okay. Next is an action item. The Asset Management Steering Committee. I know they've been working on this a lot. Troy We've had a lot of dialogue about this also. So Troy, thanks for being here.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Can we go back real quick to the maybe the slide 2 of the presentation that you just did? Because it's kind of it's very important to what we're trying to accomplish with asset management. Keep going.
2.
So asset management, it has several goals that are set that we'll go over in a minute. But if we're talking about what is WAMPO, and we look at this and we see the discussion on decision making, I mean, we're going to make a lot of decisions on how to spend the money, and it's important that we have all the information in front of us when we have those discussions. Prioritization and selection of projects. It is exactly what transportation asset management helps provide information to do. And then even in the planning and evaluation for transportation and the goals that we set for what we want to do with our transportation asset management plan, that's exactly what we're looking at trying to accomplish with the transportation asset management plan. Can you go to our presentation now? I'm up here again because there's been a couple questions that were asked as to what we're trying to accomplish, and maybe some issues or concerns that were brought up. One of them was the question of, when this transportation asset management plan is completed, is that the end-all be-all, or is it a requirement that we follow whatever projects it lists as what it thinks is the most important? The answer is no. It's certainly not. It's just simply information based on some objectives, some information, data gathering on roads, and that kind of thing. So it gives us a starting point of a list of projects that might be a good thing to start the discussion that we as politicians get to start from and say, okay, well, yeah, that's fine. The nerd over here said, hey, let's work on these projects because mathematically this is what it's saying. But we all know that we have people in our own cities and the state, and there's other priorities that could never mathematically be figured out to come up with what plans to work with or work on. So we get to debate it and move projects around or knock projects off the list, whatever. But I think that's important to understand, that this is not anything that tells you what to do. It simply provides information. Does anybody not understand that aspect of a transportation? Okay, I'm going to flip over to slide 1 here then. The AASHTO, which is the federal government side of asset management, as well as a lot of things, has an excellent definition of what a transportation asset management plan is, which I'll go over real quick. But I want you to know that we're an MPO and we're not a Department of Transportation. So nothing works one for one. It's not exactly the same because we have a body that comes up with what projects we work on, whereas a Department of Transportation might actually look at this and use this as their definitive method of figuring out what projects to work on. So the goal of a transportation asset management program is to minimize the life cycle cost. That's what we're here for now, right? We only have $12 million a year. We probably have $150 million worth of projects we want to get done. So how is it that we make sure that we are the most efficient at what we do? And one piece of that is an asset management plan. So it minimizes the life cycle costs for managing and maintaining transportation assets, including bridges, tunnels, roads, etc. It's important for a transportation asset management program to support a strategic resource allocation process that uses a performance-based approach to maintain and preserve physical assets. Really, that we come up with what our ideas of what is important in the assets that we're maintaining or that we're looking at, how we go about rating the roads and the bridges to figure out the methodology we're going to use behind that. And this will simply spit out, again, a number, an index number, or a list of projects based on the requirements we put in. And then we use that to do our best job of managing the money that we've been elected to manage. So a definition of a transportation asset management plan is it's a strategic and systematic process of operating, maintaining, upgrading, and expanding physical assets effectively throughout its life cycle. It focuses on business and engineering practices for resource allocation and utilization with the objective of, and this is the most important part, the objective of better decision-making based upon quality information and well-defined objectives. I can't say that any better than what's been given by AASHTO. So the 5 core questions that are addressed when the Transportation Asset Management Plan is complete are: what is the current state of our physical assets? Something really cool is Thursday, the Department of KDOT is bringing down a vehicle that has all kind of radar and all kinds of it's the thing that goes around and drives around, and it looks and it figures out the ratings for all the roads, and we're all invited. You're all invited to come check it out. And there's 2 times. I believe it's 9:30 and 11. So if you're interested in seeing a really neat apparatus that is going to help us as a city of Wichita, as WAMPO, and even if we want in our jurisdictions at some point, it'd be neat to come check that out. What are the required levels of service and performance delivery? Is one of the questions that's answered by TAM. Which assets are critical to sustain performance? What are the best investment strategies for operating, maintenance, replacement, and improvement? And what is the best long-term funding strategy? For us, maybe that won't answer that last one as well, but it is important, and it can help in figuring out funding for certain things. Okay, there's a little video I think that everybody here, does anybody want to see this video? Raise your hands. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Well, I don't want to take up too much time. So when we started with asset management, looking at it, I've said all these slides before, so I'm going to blow through them. And if anybody wants to slow me down, please feel free. Our initial focus was on pavement and bridges, transit asset management under the direction of Kansas KDOT. KDOT's already doing this, and one of the things that we've at the very beginning decided was we were going to try to do everything we can in this system to make sure that KDOT can use our information and we can use their resources and they can use our resources to make sure we're all continuing to work together as we always have with WAMPO. Some of the ongoing activities, AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway Transportation official guides, guidebook is where a lot of what we're doing has come from. So we're not reinventing the wheel here, but we are seeking to understand a little better as an MPO. Our steering group has developed asset management processes and worked on a plan for WAMPO, and we've presented it a few times, and we're still working on pieces of it. And we're currently says self-assessment. What that really means is we were looking at either hiring a consultant or have someone locally within WAMPO to work and be more dedicated on this, and we're still trying to figure that out right now. And then the last thing is the establishment of objectives, outcomes, and policies, which, by the way, is what you're going to vote on here in a few minutes. So as of everything else that we've looked at, this is kind of the most important things to look at. So some of the objectives that we're asking you to vote on is that we define conditional data to be collected for the region's bridges and pavement. We come up with a consensus of what is the best method or the accepted method for us to use to collect the conditional data. Complete the collection of pavement condition and bridges, information for the regionally significant elements of our area. Establish and promote a collaborative relationship with KDOT for statewide and regional asset management activities. Improve coordination among member organizations, including KDOT. Provide a full understanding of the impacts of transportation investments. Provide an understanding of the role of transportation within the region. Have a better understanding of how asset management is integrated into the scenario planning initiatives of WAMPO. Improve credibility with elected officials on transportation-related matters. I was really hoping Ranzo would be here today to talk about that a little bit more, but that's okay. As to the technical elements of investment decisions for the suballocated and regionally significant transportation projects and programs, understanding of the risks and risk management associated with project decisions, identify and analyze financial strategies that help to address the needs of the region's transportation system. Those are the objectives, and the outcomes that we're looking at are decisions that result in a cost-effective investment in our MPO and our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and then into the Transportation Improvement Program. Be able to inform the investment strategy of impacts and risks of projects that are selected and help to prioritize them. improve coordination among member organizations, including KDOT, achievement of the performance targets that we set out. And then finally, the policies we're looking to adopt are promoting preservation as a regional priority, promoting the transportation system as a regional economic asset, and then WAMPO will lead regional data collection and sharing of actions, promote the use of asset management and bridge and pavement related technical project recommendations, promote collaboration among WAMPO members between WAMPO planning partners and with organizations that deliver and use transportation services and the region's transportation system, identify and discuss what are the tipping points for technical and operational considerations for projects identified and project prioritization. And that was a lot to go through. I feel like I've went through all that a few times now up here. I really wanted to just kind of drive home why we're doing what we're doing, what asset management is supposed to achieve. And today I'm asking you as a body to vote on the objectives, outcomes, and policies that were presented today. So first, I'd entertain some questions on specifics or ideas or where we're at on things.
Questions, kind of, I know that was, you ran through that, Troy. We discussed this a little bit. I think there's a guarded caution between our respective city managers and our own city and county road, engineers about what they're doing today and assessing their own cities and communities. And what's the impact? Are we making policy that supersedes what they're doing and things like that? So I think you've had that feedback that there's a tremendous caution going on.
Yeah, it's caution for that as well as for, is this something that would tell you what you can't work on? That you can't work on something that you think is important.
Right.
And obviously very valid, especially in an MPO where we have all the 23 cities and entities that are working together to try to do the very best we can. I think as it comes to how we're going to measure things, that's certainly a discussion we've had extensively in our group, in our committee. I'm sure that we've talked about that before on and off with WAMPO. I don't think that it would be required that we go to a specific one only for everyone method of figuring that out, because there are methods of, if you measure things one way in one city and another city measures things there's way, you can make a translation that would feed our information correctly. But I think it would be in everybody's best, in my opinion, it would be in everybody's best interest if we did come up with a consensus or consensual way to do it, because then it is really easy for us to apples and apples compare roads and everything. And if we were to figure out a central method of doing it, there's a possibility sometime in the future that is part of WAMPO that we as a service would run that for all the city, all of our entities, go out and measure everything. But that's down the road. That's not really what we're asking for today, and that's not what we've decided is even one of the objectives per se, is to come up with one method that will be forced on everyone. And that's certainly something down the road that we can discuss as I hate the word force because I don't think that's appropriate. I really think it's more figuring out what is the very best method and most efficient way for us to get the information we need to make the decisions we're going to make in the next 40 years on what projects we're going to work on. Did that answer or that help at all? Okay. Yeah. And in no way is this, again, I mean, at the very outset, I think I said that MPOs are different than a Department of Transportation in that we have 23 different entities that bring all of their projects that need to be worked on to this body, and we discuss them and we approve them, and we've always done that in the past. All this is doing is providing a little bit more information on those same projects. And I would hope that everyone would want to know the information on a project or the projects that they're looking to be worked on.
I think I represent a rather consensus that, I think cities are going through even their own internal analysis. Do we spend money to extend the life of a road versus replacing a road with a whole different product? There's all kinds of, I know we've got a bridge on K96 that's already been determined how much energy, I mean, it's fragile, so to speak, and so, you know, does WAMPO want to get involved in reinventing a bridge analysis when maybe KDOT or a city or the county's already analyzed the condition of that bridge and determined the repair? So,
There's an excellent
That's-
slide in the video that I chose not to show, but it would have been excellent to maybe pull that slide out. And it discusses a road that was 1.2 million, I think, is what was spent on the road to recreate it now. And over 20 years, it would be 1.2 million, and then that's after 20 years is when you would need to start rehabilitating and look to fixing it. And then with the same road, every 5 years, you would have to spend $100,000 to resurface it. So in 20 years, you spent $400,000 instead of 1.2 million on a road. And this type of system would show you that. You still wouldn't have to make the decision based on the system. It would just be information that would say, hey, yeah, I know that we're looking at redoing this road, but or completely gutting the road and putting a new one up. But if we were to do it in this way, we would be able to use those the additional, $800,000 towards another project that might be more important. Today, I don't think we have that information. As this body, I don't think we have that information.
so you'd be kind of a clearinghouse or a data collection point for data.
Yeah, it's a big
lot of-
nerd. It's a big
Yep.
Excel spreadsheet.
Janet?
Troy, I guess probably the big question is who's making the assessment, who's doing the evaluation? And is it possible under what you've presented here that all of the jurisdictions, can we come up with a system where all the jurisdictions basically do their own evaluation and submit the data, and then WAMPO is the clearinghouse for the data?
Yeah, either way would work. I think I mentioned that there are, if we were all to choose to do it ourselves in our own methods, or if a few decided to get together and come up with a way, but several did not, because they've done it the same way for a long time, or it works very well with the way that they manage their roads. There are still methods, and again, this isn't reinventing the wheel, this has been done many times, of taking that data and then figuring out how it would translate into the WAMPO system that would generate, again, and we're only worried about the regionally significant roads here, not.
So what we're looking at here today doesn't define which way we do it. That's a later decision.
That's true. That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Because that's probably the thing that makes everybody nervous, is what are we locking ourselves into?
Sure. I get that, and that's probably going to be a pretty long discussion. It's pretty technical, honestly, when you get into the different ways, and there's only a few really generally accepted ways of those types of measurements. But that vehicle that we're looking at Thursday, for example, it measures everything, uses multiple different types of radar and laser and camera, et cetera. I have a feeling that as we see that and we understand how it works, that we will want to move in that direction individually. I'm not saying that WAMPO should force any of that, but I think it would be a good idea to at least understand what's out there and to use it. But as you said, we're not asking for that today at all.
This is a framework that essentially defines this, I don't know what the scope of this, what are we calling it?
It's, I think, Janet's desired outcomes.
Right.
So objectives and
Policies, but it isn't
it's not binding.
it's not the methods necessarily, or the
Right.
who's gonna do exactly what and
Right.
all of that.
Phil,
so,
you want to comment
okay.
to confirm? What?
It's exactly right. I think we're just looking at the kind of the methodology behind developing this. And then the actual practice could be, again, we could be the central repository for data and those kinds of things. But, just like Troy pointed out that KDOT's going to come down this week to have a demonstration, that the city of Wichita has a pavement assessment methodology that they do, that they want to come to the TAC meeting on the 28th of August to make a presentation there. And I think there's several different ways we could go about doing this, but it's just, how do we do this to make it kind of consistent to where people can get the needed information that they want in order to make their decisions?
How many different methodologies do we use are we talking about a half a dozen different ones? Are we talking, everybody got their own, or do the engineers have a standard that?
Pretty much everyone has their own. There are a few standards out there. There's PCI, and I can't remember exactly what that stands for. Jim might be able to help me out. Pavement Condition Index. That's like a scale of 1 to 100. There's scales of 1 to 10. Bel Air, we use an index of nothing needs to be done. It needs to be crack sealed. It needs to be overlaid. So there's a wide variety of different indexes. The main thing that we're concerned about on the committee is if Bel Air calls a road in poor condition, is Wichita going to agree that that road is in poor condition, or are they going to say it's in good condition? So the main issue is making sure that we're all using the same definitions to assess the roads.
Okay. Tom?
I was going to say, this is a discussion that's been going on for many years because everybody uses a different grading system. On bridges, you've got a grading system pretty well set. Engineer looks at it, specs it, and tells you how good it is, how bad it is. Capacity, you can figure that out, but actual pavement is tough. And everybody's got their own opinion. You know, a crazed road looks bad, but it may be good for the next 10 years. You got another road that's got soft spots in it, you can patch it all you want, you still got a soft spot. So what we're looking at and what has been going on, and there's been several people in and out of the process, so it never got finished, is getting consistently the same, as best consistently as you can, appraisal of roads in the area. And I think that's where Troy's trying to come from. I mean, it's never going to be perfect, but it'll be a lot clearer than it is today.
So my question, is this going to be a criteria then for picking projects in the criteria? Is there going to be a standard
No.
criteria that comes out and says, well, your project doesn't meet this criteria, so it doesn't qualify for a project then?
The intent is that it would be one of the considerations. It is not the sole criteria for picking projects. That would be up to the project selection committee to make those recommendations, but it's one piece of that puzzle. That's what we foresee it being anyway.
Which I truly see as becoming problematic for a lot of the cities out there.
One of the interesting things about a transportation asset management program is that we make the rules on it. If there are certain things that you want to have added to the criteria, or there's additional things that aren't normal that we want to add to the selection process, we can just throw it in. It's not like we are developing a system that will start knocking out things. It's always going to have, and even currently, we have criteria for all the projects we work on. Those will not go away in lieu of this. This is really just information to help provide information for all the projects. I don't know if that helped in your question or not, but I really don't think this is a system that just knocks stuff out. I think it's really just an additional piece of information that as we discuss what projects we want to work on and in what order or use the $12 million for this year, that is one of the things that we'll look at.
And it's really no different than any other ordinance or whatever we do as city and county officials. If it doesn't, we can tweak it along the way. I mean, it's not set in stone. This is what it's always going to be. If we find that we need to change the criteria or the guidelines or whatnot, that can come back and be changed. So what we decide today may not be what happens in next year or 5 years from now. So
Absolutely.
I think that's the other thing. We don't want to get too locked in that this is it and this is it forever, but we still have the authority to change.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and I think I mentioned earlier, and I was having a discussion with Gloria earlier, and she put it perfectly, I think, and even better than I'm going to say it now. But really, there's a balance that we all make as we debate the projects of politics as a low P. You know, what do we see as important to us in our cities, and how that impacts regionally, and then also the data, the numbers, the information on which roads are degrading or better be fixed, or they're going to be a $10 million project next year versus a $400,000 project this year. All that information is just coming to us, and we balance it together as a group. We debate it together as a group, and we come up with consensus. So I would say no, this wouldn't knock a single thing out. It would just be information, and then we would still debate it as we did before.
All right.
I've sat through those committees before, and criteria gets established, and the next thing I hear is, this doesn't meet the pavement, it's regionally significant, but it doesn't meet that, so we're putting this other project in front of it, or we're kicking it out. I've sat in enough of those committees to see that criteria becomes a very established type of way that projects get graded.
Probably similar to the project list we looked at earlier, right? Where we had X number of dollars for the end of the year, and if we didn't use it, we were going to lose it. So we had a whole bunch of projects that came through, and a few of them were knocked out because they didn't meet the criteria. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. Very similar, right?
Yeah, so it becomes a criteria that does kick out projects.
Okay.
Also noted.
Yep.
Sure. Okay, so shall we circle the discussion back to any other comments? And if not, we entertain a motion to approve or deny the
It's on the board.
proposed. Oh, there you go. Okay. Tom?
I hear what Bruce is saying, but I know this has been one of the big issues with this organization on how you separate good roads, bad roads. When you get away from capacity and some other issues and you start looking at actual pavement, I see this being a benefit to most of the cities in Sedgwick County, so.
Yes, this is discussed a long time, and this has gone in a different direction than what anything that I had really thought that would be coming up back to us. This has been expanded considerably from what I, in my understanding originally, was being put in our budget for the asset management of procedure that we'd be looking at. So my understanding it's gotten way bigger than what I had thought it would be at this point.
I think from the perspective of Wichita City Council, as far as what we've seen with our roads, especially down in areas like southeast Wichita where we feel like our roads have been neglected and there's been some investment going, there's this constant struggle between east and west Wichita and versus south and north and the money going where when they implemented this asset management criteria and when they were actually taking inventory of what was going on, they started investing heavily in those areas that weren't being invested in because they found out that when we were doing the pavement condition index, it was really unfair to some of our older areas, and we really did find out that at least from my point of view, last year we invested more money in southeast Wichita on roads than we had in a long, long time because of this new asset management strategy. And so, and it also helped us stretch our dollars too. And it was really, I had some of the same concerns. So just from my perspective in an area of Wichita that seemed to be neglected, I felt like the criteria really helped in those areas that didn't feel like they were getting the attention they needed. And again, it is probably more robust decision-making tool at the city of Wichita than it would be for this governing body. I mean, I think it would be just one piece of the decision-making puzzle. In Wichita, that's kind of how we're just doing it. It's kind of our decision-making tool to decide investment, but that would totally be up to this group.
Oh, yes, Carl.
I think this is one of those things it'll never be consistent. It'll always change, but it's a good starting point. So I think I would be supportive of it.
Is that a motion?
Well,
We had a
not yet.
motion.
I don't think we had one.
Not yet.
I would make the motion, yes.
Is there a,
Second it.
there's a second. Tom? Yeah, I'd like to do a, what's that called? A secondary motion, a substitute motion. Amended, substitute. Okay. Based on the fact that Wichita's gone through a pretty deep analysis And the Director of Public Works is going to present to the TAC this month what for consideration what they do. And with this term, I'd like to, my substitute motion would be to delay until we have feedback from the TAC after they see what Wichita does. And then we readdress this further.
I would second that motion, just because I really would like some of the smaller cities to feel more comfortable about what's being talked about.
I would withdraw my motion and yield to the substitute motion.
Okay.
It's acceptable to second.
I just don't want this to die. It's something we need to think about. Keep it on the road.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to die.
Well, it's not died yet. And Troy, I know you've done a lot of work on that. I don't mean to be kicking it another,
I'm mad.
another 30 days.
It is hard to digest all this, I think.
Okay.
So
So any other conversation?
The motion be we table this till next month.
Yes.
yeah, if I may,
Yes.
Mr. President, I guess I'm totally fine with the motion too, but I don't want to see this drag on forever either. You know, I mean, we have this this thing we're going to do with Wichita where we're going to see how they've used it, that kind of thing. But I don't think we're going to ever not have a concern of someone. I think there's always going to be Andover or some other community that's going to say, hey, you know, I'm not really comfortable with the fact that, you know, I do things my way and now I'm going to be forced to do it or not, or it's going to knock out projects because X, Y, or Z. That's always going to be a part of it. I haven't done my job, I don't think, if most people here don't understand how important and impactful having a transportation asset management system is, or process is. We have $12 million a year, and this is one thing that will really help us understand if we're being the most effective with those dollars as we possibly could be. Without it, we're just debating what we think is the best thing for ourselves. With it, we really have an understanding that if we spent $12 million in this way, it'll allow us to reach that, you know, closer to that $650 million mark that we've identified as projects in the long run. So it's a long-term view. And if we were to just move one or two projects around within the next 5 years, that could be a couple $1 million that we have, again, to put towards additional things. So I'm not stopping. I don't want to stop the motion that was given, but I want to ask that we look quickly to vote at least on the objectives and such that we provided today. Maybe at the next meeting after the presentation in Wichita. That's
Okay.
Make a real quick comment too, and I'll get, this is something that's important enough that the county and the city were on task team a couple years ago, along with some others, on how to identify road and pavement. And so it's an ongoing thing that people have talked about for several years, and that we haven't done anything, so.
Right.
What you just said is exactly what I thought we were getting, how to identify those type situations. This is much more extensive than what you just said.
Okay. So it's been a new motion or a substitute motion and a second on the floor. Any other comments? Being none, all in favor of the motion that's on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Troy, thanks for your hard work on this.
Group effort.
Okay, reports. Mr. KDOT, Mike Moriarty.
I have no report. I'm fresh back from vacation, and a number of my counterparts are on vacation as we speak, so I did not have the time or opportunity to produce a thoughtful, competent report.
Okay.
But I'll talk twice as long.
Yes, Wichita Metro area for KDOT. Mr. Tom Hine.
I have a lengthy report.
Okay.
Just
You got
3 items.
You got a PowerPoint presentation?
I could make one real quick here. We could stay another hour. Which way our intelligent transportation system on Wichita's highways announced yesterday that we are offering emails and texts to people from our traffic management center. So you can sign up for that at the whichway.org website. At the bottom of the page is My Kansas 511, where you create an account and check Wichita Which Way alerts. Those alerts are not cumbersome or such that you will want to unsubscribe. They don't happen very often, maybe 3 times a week. And they generally are significant events like a highway being completely closed down or a significant crash or other incident, typically lately on westbound US 54 between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. But it varies. It can be other things too. So invite you to subscribe and take a look at that service at whichway.org. The second thing is today we opened up a number of lanes of West Street underneath US 54 in that project on the west side, and that will really help traffic flow on West Street. There will be some minor closures in the future as we finish that work down on West Street, but it's much improved over the way it has been over the last few months. And the third item is we have begun discussions and planning for the August 21st eclipse that we will see just touch the edge of Kansas for 100% occultation. We'll have about 92% in Wichita, and that will be on Monday, August 21st. And we are kind of working through what we intend to put on our message boards across the state to discourage people from stopping on the highway because of the eclipse.
Fascinating, fascinating. Thanks. And I did notice that you're not the Turnpike Authority, but now we're going to more gates or we have less gates. And
They are eventually have fewer gates. And the new ramps that we will see on East Kellogg will not have gates.
Right.
So they will be reading license plates and your
register your tags.
Your vehicle. It's free.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Again, Rick Backlund is not present, so unless we don't have anything from the Federal Highway Administration, Mock T's not here. I don't think, is Mock T here? Nope. So Wichita Transit, Steve Spade. Batting cleanup.
Yeah. Be a lot more fun to hang around if I had a vote, but I won't go there. Just quickly, I want to give you a ridership update. Our ridership for our fixed route system in June was about 105,000 people, which was up 15% from the same month last year. Means our average daily ridership, we've grown from about 3,700 rides a day to about 4,300 rides a day on the fixed route system. So things are, the route changes now are finally getting back. We're starting to see some ridership increases. This is a graph that shows the queue line. We changed our queue line operation in May. As you can see, traditionally we were carrying about 1,000, 1,500 riders per month. In May, we carried almost 6,000 people. In June, we carried over 12,000 people a month. So it's been a really, really popular service. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to use it, but a lot of it's event-driven. If you come down on a final Friday, we have standing loads leaving Clifton Square, and they're full until the bus gets to Delano. So it's been a lot of fun to see the growth in that service. It'll be interesting. We've got a couple concerts coming up with Trust Arena with Neil Diamond and then Paul McCartney later this month. And we are already getting calls from people about where they can park to catch the trolley to get to the show. So it's been fun to see the growth. We had a couple other things I'd update you on, and I think I'll do it next month, but we, working with WAMPO, are awarding 5310 projects. I'll give you some more detail on that next month. And then we're also working on a project to partner with the school districts to focus on schools that need transportation services and working up a partnership to work collectively with them this school year. And we'll bring you some more information on that next month when hopefully we'll have a little more time. Thanks. Happy to answer any questions.
What does the Q and Q line stand for?
I'm free.
Q stands for free, so all right, that's a good one.
Free, I think was the way we.
All right, thanks, Steve. Okay. I think that's the, any other business anybody wants to bring forward? I know this is a little lengthy of a meeting, so, but I think we covered some good stuff. So thank you all for being here, and the meeting is adjourned.